Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Yontah Pravesha Mama Vachamimam Prashuptam Sanjeevayatyakhila Shakti Dharaswadhamna Anyamscha Hastacharana Shravana Tvagadim Pranannamo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam. So thank you for joining us. We are continuing our exploration of the 9 islands of the heart. We started with how to hear, how to listen from the heart. And we started with listening from the heart, means the sound vibration goes in through the ear and penetrates the heart, and thereby eliminating any superficial communications, but really learning the art of having heart-to-heart communications. And now we are at the last island of the heart. Last 3 weeks, we have covered what is divine friendship. And this week, we are going to cover what is Atma Nivedanam, or complete self-dedication. What does that look like? And when we explore this, you may find some things a little difficult to understand, and that's gives us an opportunity to explore a little deeper. So the word in Sanskrit is called Atma Nivedanam. Atma means the self. Nivedanam means to offer. It's going to sound interesting because how do you offer yourself to the self? So it's very interesting. One great saint that I really refer to him quite often is a saint called Rupa Goswami. He was a saint in Vrindavan who was quite a prolific writer and a very devout devout practitioner of bhakti. He was known to sleep under different trees every single day because he wanted to make sure that nothing that he owned, that he actually claimed to have possession over or lorded over. So he would make sure he'd take shelter of different trees every night and every day. And he would only eat what was provided to him when he went out begging door to door, simply proposing the people in the homes to give him something to eat, just enough to sustain his body. So he wrote very beautiful yoga texts, wisdom texts. And one of them is called The Ocean of Devotion. There's a book called The Ocean of Devotion. And in English, in Sanskrit, it's called Bhakti Rasa Mrita Sindhu. So there, he explains very nicely this principle of Atma Nivedanam. So this Atma Nivedanam is divided by 2 categories by many sages contemporary to him, such as Sanatan Goswami, who is another great saint from the same era, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So these are the 3 saints that we have extracted our discussion, today's topic from. So he divides Atma Nivedanam, or complete self-dedication, in two parts, two categories. And he divides them. First one is the dedication of one's ego. And the second, he dedicates it as the dedication of the body. So ego dedication, what does that look like? We understand from the ancient wisdom texts, also known as the yoga texts, that we human beings have gone through many, many changes and transitions and transmigrations from one body to another. It has gone on to explain that we have gone through 8,400,000 species of life. That means we have been everything that we could possibly imagine and things that is beyond our imagination. So every time we get a body, there is an identification that takes place with the body. And not just directly with the gross matter, but the identification that the body is been given. For example, some of us identify as boys, some as girls, some white, some Indian, some American, some British. And then when you go up to the higher planets, some will identify as a demigod, Brahma, and many, many other beings in the higher realms. So this identification, this false identification that comes with the place of birth and the condition of birth and the type of body we get, this is called the ego. So when we give up this identification of who we are, where we are, what we are, this is called Atma Nivedanam. This is step one. I'm going to be coming back to this. And then the second one is called, there's a very beautiful term that they use, it's called Deha Bhakti Viveka. That means the dedication of the body in the service of the divine. So we have to see how this body can be engaged in the service of the divine within ourselves and outside. Another saint that I often quote, his name is Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He very beautifully writes, Manasa Deho Geho Jo Kichu Mor. Very beautifully he writes, very poetically, that, O divine, O son of Nanda Maharaj, I offer you my body, mind, and words. So this is a very interesting concept, how we offer our body, mind, and words. So this is a very unique relationship that we have with ourselves and the divine. Because unless and until we have a divine relationship with ourselves, we are not able to have a divine relationship with the divine. So therefore, these two categories, the ego and the body, when you combine these two, then it makes complete Atma Nivedanam. Even though it's categorized into, each one of them is a category of Atma Nivedanam. Let me give a little bit more breakdown. You heard of selfless service. Everyone heard of selfless service? Yes. Many of you heard of Mother Teresa. She did a lot of selfless service. And you may be aware that when we do selfless service, we do not lose our identity. We know who we are. My name is Angela, and I am doing selfless service to everybody in Bulgaria. So there is an identification that she knows herself, and she's engaging in the service of others and in the service of the divine. Then there is this category, it's called the self-forgetful category, where you lose yourself in the service. And this you'll find in a special place in India called Vrindavan. The residents of Vrindavan, they're known by this category of self-forgetfulness. They forget who they are because they're so absorbed in the service of others and in the service of divine. So this is how we understand these two categories of Atma Nivedana. And someone might say, oh, Atma Nivedanam sounds like complete surrender. But yes, there is a small difference. There's a little technicalities. There is something called complete surrender. We went and studied the 6 layers of surrender, the 6 processes of surrender. And it's very deep. It's very deep. But there is something deeper than that. Atma Nivedanam is a little deeper than surrender. So now, let me explain what is this surrender. Complete surrender in Sanskrit is called Sharanagati. Sharanagati has 6 stages and it means complete surrender. That means we take complete shelter in the divine to provide and take care of all of our needs. Everything will be provided for. I have nothing to worry. My food, my shelter, my family, everything will be taken care of. Everything will be provided for. Nothing to worry about. So this is called complete surrender, Sharanagati. But Atma Nivedanam, complete self-dedication to the divine and to ourselves. It is where we understand that we are the possession of the divine. Very, very little different, but it's a big difference. When we understand that we are the possession of the divine, that means the divine can do anything and everything he wants, when he wants, how he wants, to engage us in the service. So these are the 2 different categories, and I have broken this down so that it's easier for you to understand the difference between Sharanagati and Atma Nivedana, the difference between selfless service and self-forgetful service. Now, I want to give you some beautiful illustrations of this. There's many, many great personalities that is explained, whose characters have been explained in the ancient wisdom text called the Srimad Bhagavatam. 2 personalities that I'll speak about. One is this great king, the most pious, loving king, who epitomized Atma Nivedana. His name was Ambarish, and it is explained that he was so completely devoted and dedicated to the divine that he used every single one of his limbs in the service. He used his hands to serve others, to clean temples, to wash the feet of the divine and the pilgrims. He used his eyes to glance at the divine. He used his ears to listen to the beautiful glories, the transcendental glories of the divine. He used his mouth to only speak of the transcendental qualities of the divine and our relationship with the divine. So in this way, he engaged every one of his senses, every one of his working senses, and the knowledge acquiring senses in the service of the divine. So he is categorized as one of the great personalities who epitomizes this principle of Atma Nivedana. Then there is this other great king. He is the son of Prahlad Maharaj. We have studied about him as well. His son, he was the most powerful king in the lower planetary systems. And when the divine came in the form of a dwarf, begging for 3 steps, because it is the duty of a king, if someone comes and begs for anything, that you must give. That you can never say no. This is the culture of kings. And when this divine came in the form of a dwarf, and he asked the king, Bali Maharaj, my dear Bali Maharaj, I have come here to beg alms from you. And he replied by saying, please tell me, what is it that I can offer you? He said, I just simply want 3 steps. I want enough land to just put 3 steps on. That's all I need. It is a very common tradition in the ancient times. The sages would go to the kingdoms and ask the king for a little piece of land where they could put a little cottage. And under the shelter of the king, they would practice their spiritual lives. So he accepted this offer. Bali Maharaj said, yes, so be it. And this dwarf, the divine disguised as a dwarf, he expanded himself, and with 1 feet, he took over the higher planetary systems and the lower planetary systems with his other feet. And the third, he said, I need more land, I need more property. So Bali Maharaj said, you may now place your 3rd feet on my head. So the divine, in the form of a dwarf, he puts his feet on his head, which is another symptom of giving their blessings in ancient times. Then this Bali Maharaj, he had actually defied his own spiritual master. His spiritual master knew that this dwarf, it seemed too simple of an ask, just to ask for 3 steps. So his spiritual master knew that this must be someone, not just a regular person. It could be someone very divine. And he immediately guessed that it was the divine personified coming to beg alms. And Bali Maharaj was so committed. If the divine personally has come to beg alms from me, then why should I resist myself from giving the divine the alms that he has come to beg? So he defied his own spiritual master to serve the divine. And he was then pushed down into the lower planetary systems where he resides to this day. So this is another example of what is Atma Nivedanam, where you completely sacrifice yourself. Completely sacrifice yourself. We are not ready to give up our clothes, our car, our ear pods, our phones. And here you see this great king. He has everything in the world, and yet he's ready to give it all up. So this is what Atmanivedana means. Be ready to give everything up for the service of the divine. There is no holding back. And then I want to tell you another story of another great personality. I want to make sure I'm not going over time. Okay, we're good with time. So this is a story of a vulture. It's one of the most epic stories from the Ramayana. We see this vulture, his name is Jatayu. He had gotten really, really, really old that he could barely fly. And he was sitting on top of a very, very tall tree in the forest of Kiskinda in the Himalayan regions. And he was just sitting there and taking his time and just enjoying his life as a vulture on this treetop. At that time, there was this great king, a demoniac king named Ravana, who had kidnapped the wife of Ramachandra, who was the great king, personification of piety and religiosity, and morality and ethics. So his wife, named Sita Devi, she was being kidnapped by this demoniac king with 10 heads, and he had 20 arms, and he wanted to enjoy her. So he kidnapped her, and he was flying away on his chariot. And Jatayu, he observes this scene, that this demoniac king is stealing the wife of someone else, of Lord Ram. So what did he do? Imagine, old age, he goes and he lunges at Ravana. And he lunges at Ravana with his big, huge flapping wings, and he wants to take Ravana down. Ravana, what you're doing is not right. She's the loyal, chaste queen of Ram, and she's patiently waiting, and you have tricked her. So he attacked Ravana, and Ravana fought back with 20 of his arms, and he was finally able to chop off one of the wings of Jatayu. And Jatayu kept fighting with one wing, and finally Jatayu could not hold any longer, and he dropped to the ground. And eventually we see how he passed away from his injuries. Why is this vulture considered in the same category of Atma Nivedanam? Such sacrifice, such dedication, self-sacrifice. Let us analyze his situation. Jatayu is a vulture. And he's old, very old. Who in our normal mind, in our old age mind, would like to give up our body for someone else? When we get older, we become more self-absorbed. We become more concerned about what will happen next. What will happen to my legacy? Who will take care of my kingdom? Who will take care of my possessions? Who will take care of my house? Who will take care of my money? What will happen to my children? These are all our concerns. If you go to an old age home, which I recommend some of you to visit, and have some discussions with people who are on their way transmigrating to another body. you'll be surprised to know that there's a unique set of fears that they have in their life. They're very, very concerned about everything that they have done and acquired throughout their life. And Jatayu, being a vulture, he disregards everything, all of the equations that we all have to go through when our bodies get old. He defies all of that to sacrifice his love, his own life in the service of Ram. Ram, in this case, is the personification of the divine. And so he sacrifices everything in the service of the divine. So this is why vulture Jatayu is heavily praised by sages who understand this principle of Atma Nivedanam. What a self-sacrifice. I know in our own personal lives, it's very difficult to give up comfort when we have to give up the comfort of driving a fancy car. I know Narayani Devi, when she gave up her big truck, she used to drive a big, huge, I call it a tank, because it was a big, fancy truck she would drive. And then one day, she gave it all up and drove a small little car. And I was thinking, what a sacrifice. And Narayani Devi was sharing what a difficult journey it is to give up something so big and so comfortable, something that you're attached to something very small in comparison. And it takes sacrifice. It takes time to transition to this new environment, new vehicle. So imagine we are struggling when we switch from one car to another. And here we are seeing the dedication that Jatayu has. He's given it all up in the service of Lord Ram. So this is what Atma Nivedanam is. When we are completely dedicated ourselves to our eternal relationship and our eternal relationship of service with the divine. And when I speak of the divine, I speak of the divine that is all-pervasive, everywhere, in everyone, in everything. How can we take our lives to completely dedicate our lives to service and get lost and be forgetful of our own identity because we get lost in the service? I'm not sure where this quote comes from. They say that you will only find yourself when you lose yourself in service. That is where you find yourself. So this is what we are understanding and studying now, this Atma Nivedanam. And this principle is extremely high principle of life. And it is prevalent in Vrindavan, where the residents of Vrindavan are forgetting who they are. They're so absorbed in the service of the divine. They're so absorbed in serving Krishna, they forget who they are. So this is Atma Nivedana, my dear friends. I think I'm low on time. I don't have the time on me. If there's any questions, any comments, or any reflections, or any objections, or clarifications.
Can I ask a question, Veda Prabhuji?
Yes, yes.
This was beautiful. I was wondering, how do we find that purpose for which we are ready to give ourselves to? How do we decide this is the purpose that I'm good to give myself to?
Yes, beautiful question. Beautiful question. Bhagavad Gita explains that one of the most important fundamental questions that we have to ask is to ask ourselves, who are we? Once we find our first answer to this question, who we are, and then knowing the answer to that question, the second question is, what am I doing here? Who am I? What am I doing here? And where am I going? When we ask these three questions, then it puts us in a space of understanding the truth about ourselves. And when I talk about the truth, I'm talking about the absolute truth about ourselves. Because there is subjective truth and there is objective truth. Subjective truth is you ask yourself, who am I? And then you'll give yourself your identity of who you think you are. And then when you ask someone else, who do you think I am? And they will give you their subjective view of who you are. But deep down between the subjective and the objective, there is an absolute truth of who we are. And that comes through this process of self-inquiry. We are continuously inquiring about ourselves and seeking guidance from teachers so that they can put us in the right track where we can find ourselves. When we are driving somewhere, when we're hiking somewhere, if we ever get lost, we first pause and we ask ourselves, where am I? Has anyone ever gotten lost? Yes, I have gotten lost, and that's how I ended up becoming a monk. Because I kept asking, who am I? Where am I going? I didn't know who I was and I didn't know where I was going, so I just kept going. And then someone picked me up as I was walking around with my brother, and I was only 5. And they put us in a monastery. So this is how life happened. And so therefore, when we lose ourselves, we have to ask. When we do not know, then we have to ask, who am I? And you'll be very, very curious to know when you go through this process of self-inquiry, you'll realize who you are is a name that has been given to you by someone else. And everything else that you ask and answer yourself, you'll find there is something more to you than the name, the designations, daughter, father, mother, son, brother. All of these designations will all peel off. And you'll keep peeling off and peeling off and peeling off. And finally, you'll find something very beautiful inside. That is one process. And another process is to approach a teacher and say, hey, please help me. I'm trying to get to this location. How do I go there? And then they're able to guide you. And approaching a teacher is very interesting because you can approach any teacher, but the approach has to be also a unique process because it has to be a submissive inquiry. Submissive in a sense that you're curious to know the truth. You're not asking questions to sound cool, to let everybody know, hey, look, my name is such and such, and I can ask intelligent questions. Many people ask questions for recognition. Many people ask questions to show off their intelligence. Many people ask questions to show the teacher that they're better than the teacher. Many reasons for asking questions. So the important principle of asking questions is to know the truth, the absolute truth. And once we know that, then they're able to guide us to the purpose of our lives. Because the layers will just automatically peel off when we keep asking these questions. And when those layers peel off, you'll find your divine, illuminated self seeking to be in the service of others. Many times people say, I will serve when I have money. I will serve when I become rich. I will serve when I'm old. Many, many excuses, because service to the divine requires an illuminated self. You have to be illuminated. You have to peel off the layers that holds you back from service to others. And so therefore, you will notice that this process of self-inquiry and engaged in a spiritual dialogue with the teacher and engaging in the service of others. These are the three processes given to find your purpose in life. To find your purpose in life is not a theoretical process. It's not something you sit down and you write, oh, I figured out my purpose. You can have an idea of the direction you want to go in, but the purpose will be found through self-absorption, and which is the process of self-inquiry. The second is inquiring with humility from a teacher who will help you to guide you through the right path. And third is to engage in the service of others and engage in the service of the divine. And these three steps provide us a beautiful roadmap to finding our purpose in life. I don't know if that made any sense, Geet.
It did, Prabhuji. I think need to do homework, like you said, that there are steps to finding the purpose. First, find yourself.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Is there any comments or questions? Or any clarifications or objections? Ramananda Prabhu.
Yes, I'm always fighting with this thing of self-denial. Like it was kind of very dominant in the way it was preached in where I come from, in the background. And it led to actually a very bitter bitter state of mind, because I didn't feel any. It's like you deny yourself to an extent that you don't exist anymore, or it doesn't feel safe to exist, or so I find like my whole life I've been trying to come out of that. So, and I feel it's also present here. You also have to deny parts of yourself to be able to give up completely yourself. So what to do if you're in such a state of of mind?
Yes, very beautiful question. You cannot give yourself to anyone or to anything unless you know who you are. You have to find the self in order to give the self. So denying the self is actually a disservice. And sometimes denying the self to give yourself to the divine self it's what we call a spiritual bypass. And that is something that we have to always be cautious of. Not to deny ourselves the self. We cannot deny ourselves, because then what happens is that you get left behind. There's nothing for you to stand on. And therefore, the sages are explaining the important principles of sadhana bhakti, which is daily regulated practice of taking care of the self. It's daily. That's what sadhana bhakti means. The love, bhakti means love, sadhana means the daily routine of self-love. Self-love is not something you do once a week, once a month, or when you're bored, when you're tired. Go get yourself a manicure, pedicure. That's not self-love. Self-love is something that we have to practice every single day. And that Rupa Goswami, our sage, one of the sages, explains that it is a daily practice, sadhana bhakti. Every day we must learn to love the self. Waking up in the morning, making sure our body gets sufficient rest, making sure our body is nourished properly, making sure our mind is nourished properly. In the monk mode in Atlanta, we do our sadhana bhakti every day from 3 a.m. to about 9 a.m. Almost 5.5, 6 hours of self-love. Because it is an important part of our spiritual practice. So, beautiful question, because we always get lost, with self-denial. We cannot deny ourselves. So thank you for that beautiful question, Ramananda. Any
So
other
I
questions?
I have
Yes, maybe.
also kind of a experience of self-sacrifice. Like you can have so quickly then suddenly a burnout if you do too much for other people and you forget yourself. You can get a burnout. I don't know if you already spoke about this, but
Yes.
one time, yes,
We have had discussions about burnouts and how to deal with burnouts.
yes.
So yeah, when you deny yourself, there will be nothing to burn.
Mhm.
But we call it burnout because you have burned the fuse on both ends and there's nothing left.
Yeah, so you do service, but the service, you do it not with connection with the divine. You do it maybe you think you're the doer or something like that. And that's when you get a burnout, isn't it?
Burnout normally is a very interesting phenomenon because when you deny yourself your own existence and you keep working and working and working, and you have no reason for working, yet you're working. When you live a life without purpose, and you're simply on the food chain of this globalized world, and you have nothing to live for, yes, you burn out. But once you find your purpose, then you understand, this very principle of Atma Nivedanam is to understand that everything is happening to me by the divine. Everything is beautifully operating under divine arrangement. And to be able to not just theoretically understand that, but to actually realize that. Like to understand when the mother has a baby, the mother doesn't identify herself as the one that's nourishing the baby. It's actually the divine that is arranging the mother's body to produce this incredible nectar for the baby to be nourished. So when we become the instrument in the divine arrangement of things, then the burnout is not something that is relevant because you are simply an instrument. So yes, you're right that we have to understand that our divine purpose in this world has to be connected to the divine. And it is a state of meditation It is a level of consciousness that we live in. Constant meditation, everything happening in the world. What is the hand of the divine? What is it that I need to understand and learn and realize from this? So then we prevent burnouts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. It is so nice to be with all of you. And in 5 minutes, we were going to have another little discussion on the Bhagavad Gita. It's a very beautiful discussion. My friend Chaitanya and Radha, we three of us run this show called The Seeker's Quest, where we indulge ourselves in deep discussions to find some nectar drops from the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. So you're welcome to join us. It's at 10 o'clock. So thank you all so much. Namaste, everyone.
Namaste.